Hi there, everybody. Carlos Wyden here. Now, I decided to shoot this quick video because I was speaking to somebody yesterday and I got the following question. What's better to become financially free? Become self-employed or have a job? Okay? Now, I thought it was a very good question, so that's why I decided to make this video. Because you might be in a similar position or situation as my friend. What is actually, because you might have a job and you might realize that it's not really getting you the financial reward that you really want, okay? Or you might be already a self-employed person and you might be struggling to become financially free. Now, before I carry on, I want to explain in black and white what I mean by financially free, okay? Because a lot of people, they have their own definition for being financially free. So what is financially free? Now, it's not becoming a millionaire, okay? That is not my definition. So, forget the $1 million earnings in the bank and all that, because frankly, that's a result. Most millionaires could be financially free, but not necessarily financially free. Let me explain what that means. Financially free basically means that you're free, okay? Meaning that you have time, freedom. In other words, you can wake up anytime you want to, at any day you want to, and you have peace of mind that your bills are paid. Okay? So that's what I call financially free. When your income, okay, is over or higher than your expenses. Now, you're probably looking at me and saying, well, Carlos, my income is already higher than my expenses because I have a high-paying job. Okay, that's very well, and thank God you have a high-paying job, and thank God your income is higher than your expenses. Otherwise, you'd be in real trouble. However, the definition of being financially free is that this income has to come in on a passive income basis, okay? For those of you who don't understand the word passive, it means residual, okay? In other words, you get paid whether you work or whether you don't work, okay? So that is basically the definition of passive income. In other words, if you have all your expenses, okay, paid for every single month, whether you work or whether you don't work, then you are financially free, okay? So that is my definition of financially free. And remember, this video is about, which is better to become financially free, a self-employed person or a job person. In other words, someone with a job. Okay, so let's look at the differences, okay? What are the differences between a employee, in other words, someone working, with some self-employed? Now, let's look at the good things first about an employee, okay? The good things is that you have friends at work. So, you might be one of these persons who have excellent friends and colleagues at work, and you look forward to work because you look forward to speaking to your friends and having fun, on Fridays. And this is where TGI Fridays comes into play. You probably heard, thank God it's Friday, because you go with your friends for a beer after work down to the local pub or something, okay? So that's a nice thing about having a job. You're with people, okay, in a similar boat to you. You might be one of the fortunate persons who has actually a good job, and you might have an interesting career job. And I think that's great because you learn a lot. You're putting your mind to something that is interesting for you, and therefore the job doesn't really seem like a job. You know, it seems more like something that you like. Okay, and I think that's a good thing about a job. Okay, now the other thing about a job, you might have a limited decision making unless you are the owner or the CEO. Employees usually don't think very much, so they're just given some tasks that they have to do, and that's it, and you have to do them, and that's, you know, your thinking or your decision making is limited to the tasks that the owner or your boss actually gives you. So for the people who don't like to think very much, you know, or don't like to take decisions for themselves, I think a job is great. Okay? Now, also, a job is good to get experience. Okay? A lot of people who are very, you know, well off and financially free today, they started as employees in order to get experience, you know, to understand how the logistic works, or how the money cash flow is generated in the business, or perhaps about marketing and advertising or sales. For example, Robert Kiyosaki worked as an employee at Xerox so he can get experience in sales. Okay, now you might be a person employed right now in a similar kind of situation. You want to start your own business, but you need experience first. Okay, so that's a good thing about a job. Now, sometimes you get to travel and the company pays. However, this is usually not a holiday. It's actually a business trip, and you might be able to go to some, you know, exhibition center or visit a client abroad, and, you know, and of course it's challenging and it's nice in the beginning. But, you know, once you understand the difference between a business trip and a holiday, I think this doesn't become too exciting, you know, over a period of time. And of course, on something really nice about being an employee is that you get Saturday and Sunday off, so you have weekends off. So that's a nice thing if you want, you know, so you can spend some time and some valuable time with your family, or you basically put it into what you want to do and what you like to do. And, you know, a lot of people like being an employee because they have a safe, secure job with benefits. Now, if you're one of these people that want, you know, that are in the job situation because of this, and, you know, and you think this is the right way for you, that's great, you know. However, you know, the world is changing. Look at Spain. 25% of the people in Spain don't have jobs. America is completely in debt. You know, they're printing more money than they can ever pay. Job situations are very difficult to get. I mean, good jobs. And the people who have jobs are literally clinging on to their job with their fingernails so that, you know, so they don't lose it. Because, you know, they know that if they lose it, it's really hard to get one back. So today, the market is for the bosses and the CEO, because there's a lot of employee. The competition is very high. However, having said that, if you feel comfortable with your safe, secure job with benefits, that's a nice thing for you. So it gives you peace of mind, okay? So those are some good things about a job. There might be others. I don't know many, you know, but, you know, you could add to this. I'm sure there's a couple of things good about having a job, okay? But remember, I'm comparing this because the question was, which is better, you know, being self-employed or having a job to become financially free, okay? So I'm not comparing these two together to say which is better, you know, and being an employee or self-employed in regards to benefits. I mean, I'm putting it in regards to becoming financially free. Right, let's go on to the bad things about a job, okay? The first thing that's very bad about a job is, one, that your time is money. In other words, you're working for money. You have to trade, 7 hours or 8 hours or 9 hours or whatever time you put in every single day, that's counted to how much money you make at the end of the month, you see. Now, there's a mathematical equation here that you only have 24 hours a day, okay, that you can put in. So in other words, your income per month has a limit to how many 24 hours a day you put in yourself. Now, the second bad thing about having a job is that you actually do not own the job, okay? The job owns you. And what I mean by that is this: you cannot sell your job to someone. You cannot leave your job to your kids or to your loved ones when you're gone. You cannot, a job is actually, when I don't want to be harsh, but it's a waste of time because, you could be replaced. You're spending your time here, you're getting money out, but the minute you stop working, your income goes to zero, okay? So instead of an investment, it's an expenditure of your own time. Now, the worst thing about a job is that you can get fired anytime or you can be made redundant, okay? Which is almost the same thing. Of course, fired is because you did something wrong or you were stupid or you stole something. And made redundant is because the economy hit you bad or, the company doesn't need your services anymore. But although you were an excellent employee, you got made redundant. I have a lot of friends, actually, who got made redundant, and it wasn't their decision. It was the market decision or was the boss's decision. Basically, you are you're a little puppet there to somebody above you. They can fire you, they can make you redundant. I hate to be so harsh, but that's the reality, okay? Now, there is no passive income in a job, okay? That is a very, very big bad thing about having a job. You don't have passive income. And the other thing is you don't have leverage. In other words, you're putting your own time and you're getting paid for that time you put in. You don't actually get paid on other people's efforts. So you don't have any form of leverage in a job. And, number 8 here, you're a time slave, okay? Meaning that your time is given away, okay? Now, the most valuable thing we have on planet Earth is time, okay? That is our biggest assets apart from our brain, but time is one of the biggest assets we have because at the end of the day, it all depends what we do with our time that determines our outcome, okay? If we're productive with our time, we will be productive with our outcome, with our finances, with our relationships, with our everything. So here we're giving away 9 to 5, which is the prime time for life, Monday to Friday, for a job, okay? And that is, for me, really, really bad. Time slave, okay? And then also, there are poor retirement benefits, if you have any benefits with your job, like a retirement plan, etc. Now, before I tell you a little bit more about self-employed, let me go and show you here what I mean, just a second, with something called the 45-year plan. Okay, now most jobs, this is a job here, and this is what I call the 45-year plan. Okay? Now, this is how it goes. This is time over here. So in other words, most people start work at 18. Okay, it's just a figure. And then this is 25, and then you have 30, then you have 35, and then I put, say, 45, 55, and 65. Okay? And this is income. So, of course, you could put here, this is $1,000. And here's a $2,000, and here you have a $3,000, okay? Now, when you're 18, you usually have your first job. Now, the first job is usually under $2,000, okay? if you're 18, if you don't have a university degree. And if you do, it might be a little higher, but the difference is not really that big. Okay, but let's start here because you're smart and you started off at, say, $2,200. $2,200 at 18 years old. And that's where you started off, okay, when you were 18. And that's your income bracket every single month. Now, you might work a little bit and it might get a little bit bigger. And as you go on, you know, you get married, you get kids, and you get a mortgage. And then you want to obviously buy a nicer car, a boat, and you work harder. And by the time you're 35, you might be at the $3,000 a month, okay? And it's a nice income. You know, you can pay your bills with it, and you're happy. And but sometimes there's it depends on your spending pattern. But usually for people who are 35, they have more months than money at the end of each month. So do you see the curve here? The curve here is very gradually going up, very, very gradually. And let's say that you work, from 35 to 45 and you ended up being a top manager here. Now you're making over $3,500 a month. And, you can afford to buy a nice Mercedes and on a credit plan, and you have a nice boat on a credit plan and so forth. Okay, and then at 55 years old, you get a little higher, you get the last pay raise of your life. And let's say you're making $4,000 a month, and at the age of 55, oops, that's not a very straight line, but I think you understand what I mean. And you're over here at 55 years old, and you've reached the pinnacle of your career. So, in other words, this is the top, okay, of your career. Now, there is no guarantee in today's world that you will ever get there. Okay, today. Why? Because the internet came in. We cannot get rid of it anymore. It's changed the way people do business, and it's completely a different rules. You have different rules. Now, to become financially free, that's our point. Is this the right way? Spending here 45 years of your life, to end up when you're 55 with no guarantee whatsoever to earn around $4,000 a month, okay? And then, let's say you keep on going till you're 65, the last 10 years, you work hard, you wake up early in the morning at 7 to go to work, and you give in your 9 to 5 at 65, and you get back pains and whatever. And then, all of a sudden, the retirement comes. And, instead of making $4,000 a month, you are now paid $1,500 for the rest of your life, okay, which is less than probably what you started off when you were 18 years old, okay? It's a very scary scenario, okay, for a lot of people. And I hope this video wakes people up and encourages them to take some action. Okay, because getting a job is a great way to basically, alleviate some temporary problems. Okay, but it's not there for a long-term solution. Okay, so this is the 45-year plan. It's very, very scary when you're 65. Your income just drops dramatically, and there's no way, and this is no guarantee. You might get fired. In fact, statistics show that people over 35 years old have worked more than 5 jobs in their life, okay? So it's a very, very scary scenario. The world is completely going chaos, and this plan, worked before. This worked in the 1900s all the way now to the 1970s. Okay, when the 80s came and the 90s came, this became shaky, and now we have the technology era, and, we're in a different ball game. The rules have completely changed. You see billionaires who are, less than 30 make it to billion-dollar status. The world has changed completely. Okay, so it's very important to face that reality. Okay, now let's just go back over here to look at what is the thing, hang on, there, of the self-employed. Now, I'm going to shock you a little bit, because self-employed is pretty much your own job. Okay, when you relate to a specialist. Okay, let me explain this for a second. Let's say you are employed in a company that cleans windows. Okay, and you want to work in that company, for example, to get experience. And you get experience, and you understand the business, and you can go out and get a couple of customers yourself. You might quit your job and say, I want to start my own business. So you go home and you set up your office at home, or you could rent an office, and you have your own business for the first time. But at the end of the day, it's pretty much, jumping from one pan straight into another frying pan. Okay? Why? Because, you're still trading time for money. In other words, this comes down here. Time equals money, which is a very bad formula, because you will never ever earn much more than what you're worth. Okay, you might charge more, you might get paid much more. You can even get paid 3, 4, 5, or even 10 times of what you did becoming an employee. So there is rewards here. Okay. The good thing is that you actually own your job here. That's the difference. Here, as an employee, you don't own your job. As a self-employed, you own your job. Basically, you own your hours. You decide when to work. The good thing about being a self-employed is that you can actually sell your job. So you can sell it, okay? That's one good thing about becoming self-employed. And you can also leave it for your kids. But today, a lot of kids may not want to be doing what you're doing, especially if they have to physically do it, because there's very little leverage. Okay, there's no leverage, and there's no passive income as well. Okay, because you're a solo guy, you're the #1 guy, you're the star of the show over here. If you're a specialist, like a doctor, a lawyer, or a self-employed window cleaner, that you are basically the business. So it does have some advantages to a job, okay? Because you design your hours. However, usually, an employee has, bosses. The bosses over here are the customers. They're the ones who decide when you work, what you work with, and how much they're going to pay you. Okay, and obviously you might not have the same retirement benefits, because you might have to pay yourself some kind of a funding system. It depends on where you live and how the government operates, but it's pretty much the same thing as being an employee. So I personally do not recommend you to become an employee or a self-employed, or use this as a vehicle if you want to be financially free. Okay, that's pretty much my advice to you. I'm sorry I couldn't help you more, but there are other ways. Okay, I haven't talked about becoming a business owner as opposed to a business self-employed specialist. Okay, and there is something else called an investor. Now, the investors and the business owners is where you want to be to become financially free, and not becoming self-employed or employed. Okay, guys, hope this makes sense. Leave a comment, subscribe to the channel, and let me know what you think. Have an amazing day. Bye-bye for now.